Gentlemen, it's 11 o'clock, and today's meeting, as you know, is on supplementary estimates and interim estimates. I know that the Library of Parliament's briefing notes came in a little late, so if anybody is looking for them, we have printed copies available if you need them. As you know, the first panel will be from the Treasury Board Secretariat, and it's going to be 11 to 12, so I guess we'll be able to finish the whole round. And we have Madame Renée Lafontaine, the Chief Financial Officer and Assistant Secretary. We have Mr. Pagan, Assistant Secretary, and Ms. Marcia Santiago, the Executive Director. Welcome all. And do you have any opening remarks?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know the 10-minute limit, right?
I will
Okay.
appreciate the 10 minutes. Merci. C'est un plaisir d'être ici encore une fois.
It's a pleasure to be here once again to explain the process surrounding our supplementary estimates C. And our budget for 2018-19. So there's various, and the interim estimates for 2018-19 rather. I have several subjects to discuss today. I will tell you about several aspects about the supplementary estimates to better align them with the budget, and then I will discuss the interim estimates 2018-19. Where we discuss the initial needs for 2018-19. And in conclusion, I will discuss the organizations that will appear for the first time in this supplementary estimate C.
We simply set out some of the challenges that this committee would be very familiar with respect to their study of the estimates. And you will recall that the President of the Treasury Board appeared before you last year on a number of occasions to begin the process of aligning the budget and the estimates and to reform the estimates process. This committee has been very active in that process, including the 2012 study of estimates and supply. On slide 4, this is just a very brief summary, a reminder to the committee of the proposals made by the President to improve transparency and alignment. The most common complaint that we've heard about the estimates is the difficulty caused by having a main estimate showing much different planned spending than the federal budget. And there have been two causes for that. The first is that under previous orders of the House of Commons, the main estimates were tabled on or before March 1st, whereas there is no fixed timing for the budget. And so what has happened over the preceding years is that we were tabling the certainty of the main estimates in advance of the budget. And then we were using supplementary estimate exercises to catch up and to reflect the government's budget priorities for Parliament. And so as a result of discussion at this committee and agreement of parties in the House, there has been a change to standing orders so that for the next 2 years, we will table the main estimates on or before April 16th, and that is to say after the budget. So timing has been a very important factor in the confusion between the documents. Another challenge has been the scope, the differing scope and accounting methods of the two documents. The budget is comprehensive. It is inclusive of all expenditures of the Government of Canada, including tax expenditures, Crown corporations, consolidated special purpose accounts, such as the employment insurance account. So it presents parliamentarians with a full view of all federal expenses. The estimates, in contrast, represent a subset of that federal spending. They represent the cash requirements of departments for a specific fiscal year to deliver the programs and services of government. And so we have identified, we understand the challenge, and we have identified means of addressing this, most notably through a reconciliation table that has appeared in the last 2 exercises in the spring in our supplementary estimates A, where we do a crosswalk between the the expenses in the budget, the expenditures in the supplementary estimates, accounting for accrual differences, tax expenditures, Crown corporations, etc. The third idea advanced by the President was to better use our new focus on results to perhaps identify changes to the vote structure approved by Parliament. Currently, funds are approved by Parliament according to individual votes for departments, and these votes are organized according to function: operating expenses, capital expenses, grants and contributions expenses. Our results focus is bringing some clarity in terms of what departments' core responsibilities are and the specific programs supporting those core responsibilities. We currently have a pilot with Transport Canada to look at their grants and contributions vote and to break that out by purpose. And it was proposed by the President that we might expand on that and try additional pilots according to purpose. And then the fourth pillar is better reporting. We have improved, I believe, the format of departmental plans and departmental results reports, and we have presented much more detail online in what we call GC Infobase. So, Madam President, that is an overview of the proposals and where we're at. Moving to slide 6 on our slide, this year, as a result of the change to standing orders, we have tabled for the very first time the document entitled 2018-19 Interim Estimates, and this allows departments to begin the fiscal year with authorities until full supply for main estimates is voted on in the House in June. In April, April 16th, we will be tabling the main estimates that will include as many budget items as we can bring forward for approval. And coinciding with that, there will be the departmental plans that I mentioned. All right. Turning to the details of the two documents tabled earlier this week, the first is the Supplementary Estimates C, which concludes fiscal year 2017-2018. As we see on slide 8, these Supplementary Estimates C provide information on $4 billion in voted budgetary appropriations for 48 organizations. This funding supports many initiatives announced in Budget 17, as well as spending set out in prior budgets and updated by the Minister of Finance in his fall statement. The estimates also provide an update on forecasted statutory spending, and through these estimates we are forecasting a reduction in statutory spending of $336 million. The front end of the Supplementary Estimate C provides an introduction and some detail, including highlighting the major items, the major areas of expenditure over $150 million. So these include $622.9 million for the Service Income Security Insurance Plan, $435 million for defense spending in support of the new defense policy, $277.6 million for military missions, and then a number of other programs and priorities of the government, including the G7 summit and increased spending for veterans. The themes, if we group all the $4 billion according to certain themes, we see that wages and benefits comprises about 25%, or just over $1 billion. Defense totals $746 million, or almost 20%. Then we have climate change and the environment at $438.9 million, Indigenous programming at $337.6 million. I'll be happy to address more questions on Supplementary Estimate C. Before concluding, Madam President, just a word on these interim estimates that we tabled. It introduces the interim authorities of 122 organizations totaling $30.9 billion. And again, this will be supplanted or complemented by the main estimates to be tabled on April 16th. When we compare the interim authorities this year of 30.9, it's very close to what was sought last year as an interim authority of $30.1 billion. Madame, ceci conclut mes commentaires.
That concludes my remarks.
7-minute round. Monsieur Ayoub.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'm very happy to see our guests here today. I think that despite the fact that I received the documents only a short time ago, I think I have been able to understand them. So my question is, the fact that the budget will be tabled a few weeks earlier on the 27th of February, has that helped in any way for Treasury Board? Has it helped Treasury Board plan the supplementary estimates and to predict what's going to happen in the future, as opposed to being done in March, the budget tabling? Thank you, Mr. Ayoub. The fact that the budget will be tabled on the 27th of February will help us greatly because it will give us time after the budget and before tabling the supplementary estimates, which will be tabled on the 16th of April. It gives us time to work with our departmental colleagues and with Treasury Board to implement authorities and approvals to be able to go forward with the budget's priorities. So if we could plan for the future, it would always be a good idea, I think, to have the budget before the 1st of March, or at any rate a few weeks earlier. The idea of adjusting the dates for the tabling of the supplementary estimates is because there is no specific tabling date for the budget. So the 16th of April, under normal circumstances, is always after the budget tabling. That's why we think it's a good idea. Now, let's enter into the details of the supplementary estimates. You mentioned some specific expenses of more than $150 million. Especially with regard to military spending. In the House, we often hear that we're not investing enough in veterans. Specifically, lately, we've heard a lot about that. That seems to be the opposition's leitmotif. But we see here that $177 million were invested in services for veterans and their families. Could you tell us more about that spending? And what this additional spending will do for veterans, and what are these additional services that will benefit veterans? Thank you, Mr. Ayoub. There are 3 principal programs that have benefited from this increase. Almost 98% of this $177.2 million will be used for these 3 programs.
And other health and purchased services. Ces programmes-là sont des programmes.
These programs are current programs that exist currently. As you doubtless know, the government has announced a new program in the 2017 budget. And that was tabled in Supplementary Estimates B before the House in November and will be reflected in the estimates for 2018, 2019, in the main estimates. So the $177 million is for programs that already exist. So the increases are because of demographic factors, because there are more veterans. So there's an increase in costs of mental health services. Have further predictions been made about these needs? This is for the current year, but is the planning for the next year, I'm talking in the medium term, 2 to 3 years. How is that planning for support to our veterans coming along, specifically when it comes to PTSD and mental health? As I studied it in another committee, How are our predictions and planning going?
On the specific programs, I would defer, obviously, to the department. I'm not familiar with the committee that you mentioned that may have also looked at this. In terms of forecasting costs, what I can tell you is that we do work with the department to look at their pattern of historical spending, the actual spend, and then we look at demographic information and cost drivers to extrapolate into the future to get a sense of demand for these programs. And in many cases, these forecasts are, we work closely with the chief actuary and his staff to make sure that our projections with respect to certain benefit plans are rigorous and conform to forecasting standards in the actual area.
Mais peut-être ma dernière question, puis je vous remercie pour les réponses.
Thank you for these answers. And my colleagues may wish to go further into the details. Now, when it comes to the military income insurance program, we're talking about the security insurance plan, the $622.9 million. What is the prediction for the deficits for this plan? So the service income security insurance plan. Is this temporary or is it recurrent? After all, with the interest rates, as we've seen with pension plans in general, aren't necessarily as high as we'd like.
The response, I sort of have three sort of points to make. We've been to this committee before in terms of this program and looking for one-time funding because the volume of Canadian Armed Forces members who are returning or falling ill, being medically released, has been increasing. So the biggest portion of the funding that's required this time round of that $623 million is related to an increase in volume. So that's what's driving the costs. One of the reasons why we have to make this lump sum payment now is because actually there's the contract that we have with Manulife, who delivers, who provides the benefits to these medically released Canadian Armed Forces members, has a condition in the contract that in order to be financially sustainable, they need to keep at least 40% of all of the premiums they're going to receive for this plan, keep it in a reserve. The reserve has gone into deficit because more and more and more CAF members are falling ill and becoming medically released and are taking advantage. So Manulife has paid out their claims. We are now in deficit. The point of this one is to top up that deficit.
Mr. Kelly, for 7 minutes.
Great, welcome.
Sorry, Mr. McCauley.
It's okay. Anyway, it's good to see you. A long time, Mr. Pagan, Ms. Santiago. A couple of days ago when we were having the estimates briefing, we were talking about the departmental reports and the departmental results reports. Who is responsible for the editorial content of those and in the estimates? And the reason I ask is I was, some of the items here, you know, we talked about Pillar 4 is to provide higher quality information on performance targets and results. And we talked about the difficulty in making our way through the estimates and understanding. And I want to read a couple of the items here. We have 3.5 million to ensure the smooth functioning of courts and greater access to justice for all. We have money for grant payment, strengthen Canadian identity, amplifying the office of the OGGO, and help build a stronger Canada. Like, who is writing this stuff? Because it doesn't make it very transparent what the money is being used for. And I want to get back to the departmental reports and why I'm asking who's responsible for them. Former PBO Kevin Page commented they're just merely communication vehicles for the government, and no one uses them because they're not of any, and his quote is, there's no value to them. And I bring a point, the public services DP, where it doesn't even mention Phoenix, period, but it talks about one of their achievements was the Canada Post report, where we spent a long time traveling across the country, spent $500,000 of taxpayers' money. The government didn't even respond to the report, but But her achievement, she notes that she thanked the committee for the report and the hard work. So here we spent $500,000 traveling the country for Canada Post. Whether they broke their promise or not, it's beside the point here. But in the departmental report, there's no real comment about what they're actually doing or their achievements. So who is responsible to ensure that you're actually fulfilling pillar number 4? And if it should be the minister, let me know, and then we'll skip to other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Colley. In fact, there's two dimensions to your question. The first, in terms of the language used in these documents to explain initiatives, to the greatest extent possible, that's our language, but to the greatest extent possible, we work with finance to make sure that we're using the same language to describe funding that might be in the budget and then in the estimates.
And our whole goal is to make the estimates more understandable. Why are we using, like, I want to read something to you. Funding to implement the Impact Canada initiative to accelerate efforts towards solving Canada's big challenges, 1.4 million. So our big challenges is not the issues with the vets. They're protesting right now or fixing Phoenix. It's 1.4. Like, I have to again ask, why even bother putting this dribble in? If our whole goal is to make it more transparent to Canadians and parliamentarians.
I certainly share that objective, Mr. Colley, but again, the starting point is if the government is articulating a priority in the budget, to the greatest extent possible, we try to use the same language so that parliamentarians and stakeholders can follow the money. So I do take the point, and I'll go back to my colleagues at the Department of Finance and ask for that consideration. In terms of the departmental plans,
and the DRPs, who's responsible ultimately?
So
is it the individual ministers or the DMs or
the
Treasury Board?
ministers themselves sign off on their departmental plans, so those are owned by the departments. My team at the Treasury Board Secretariat has a role in terms of shaping content. We provide guidelines to departments in terms of content. We set out templates in terms of the financial detail and the type of information.
To match pillar number 4, do you provide instructions then to your counterparts in other departments to say, here's our goal that the Treasury Board President is working towards so that we have clarity?
Yeah, we do.
Do you go back or to point out this isn't clear or you're missing this?
So,
or should that be the minister?
It's, again, these are approved by the minister. We ask for drafts of documents. So these departmental plans for 18-19 will be tabled with the main estimates April 16th. We've asked for drafts from departments in these weeks leading up to that so that we can comment and provide.
That answers my question. I'm going to move on. Just, Ms. Lafontaine, the $623 million shortfall, I understand how it's come about or why we're putting in. How did we fall behind on this liability?
So we didn't want to stop making out payments to all of the new CAF members who. So
of course not. But how did we fall behind on this liability, topping up the money to Manulife? Were they just slow in asking for money, or we didn't foresee this crush of people coming forward?
Yeah.
Or?
So what generally happens is, we've been in the past every 3 years doing actuarial reviews of where we are with, and because it had been at the steady state, we find that because of some new increased cost drivers, so we had retroactive salaries.
That answers the question. So it's just on a 3-year cycle.
That's right.
Mr. Pagan, I'm not sure if you can answer this. There's money throughout the estimates for negotiated salary increases. I'm curious, what is the average increase, including salary, pension, sick pay, like all the top-ups, everything? What is the average increase that we're giving out right now, or that's getting negotiated right now?
In percentage terms, Mr. McCauley,
Please, yeah.
the pattern was 1.5% over.
All in per year.
5%.
The ones that are getting negotiated right now, and that are getting covered in the SUPs.
So 6% over 4 years, with some group specific adjustments to deal
Will
with.
get back to us on an average percentage per year, including pension, sick pay added, all the extra added that's actually costing.
Yeah, happily.
That's how much time?
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Quick
Well,
one.
let me ask you, what's the money going to be used for? 1.4 million to solve Canada's big challenges. That's under Privy Council.
Right. So
we're going to get very far for 1.4 million.
The Big Challenge Initiative was announced in Budget 17. It's primarily two issues, smart cities and clean technology. So $300 million over 10 years for smart city initiatives, $75 million over 4 years for clean technology solutions.
Or perhaps about a quarter of a
Thank you.
ice rink on Parliament Hill. Thanks.
Mr. Blakey for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. I wanted just to come back to the question of the delayed tabling of the main estimates and coordinating between the budget and the main estimates. I understand from the minister, both from his document and then having heard him present at committee a number of times, that the ultimate goal for the president of the Treasury Board anyway is to try and be able to release simultaneously the main estimates and the budget. And we're not there yet, but we're experimenting with delayed estimates in order to kind of better integrate the process. And of course, part of that process means having the Treasury Board Secretariat work more closely with the Department of Finance in the lead up to the release of the budget, so that the budget isn't a surprise to the Treasury Board Secretariat. And my understanding is that even under our current process, the idea was to try and increase cooperation between those two departments so that some of the information about the budget would be shared with the Treasury Board Secretariat in advance of the release of the budget in order to better coordinate the main estimate. So all that to say, has that started to happen? Is the Treasury Board Secretariat getting more information in advance of the release of the budget from the Department of Finance in order to facilitate a better coordination between the main estimates and the budget? Or are you having to wait until the release of the budget on February 27th in order to begin that work, and then you just have the window between February 27th and April 16th?
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Blakey. Obviously, I can't speak to details of Budget 18. The date was announced on the 27th. But what I can tell you is that over a number of years now, there has been increasing cooperation between Finance and Treasury Board, not only on the budget and estimates, but on a range of programs and priorities for the government. And so we're building on that close cooperation, and the fact that we will have a budget this year before, by the end of February, and the main estimates April 16th does create this opportunity where we, can do everything possible to bring the budget items into the main estimates for April 16th. Finance is well aware of the discussions that we've been having with OGGO and with parliamentarians. They're well aware of the confusion that's created by having documents that are misaligned. And I think I can say that they've been a very active partner with us in finding solutions and ways forward on this.
I mean, without speaking to what they might be sharing, is it fair to say that there is increased sharing and that the work of coordinating the main estimates and the budget is already underway, even though the budget has not yet been announced?
I think it's fair to say that, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Just a quick question, and maybe somebody could get back to me in writing. I know there was a transfer from Citizenship and Immigration to the Department of Justice for legal aid money to help refugees. It's for the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and Manitoba. And I'm just wondering if someone could get back to me with the portion of funding that's allocated to Manitoba. It's not something we have to do right now. If you could follow up in writing, I'd appreciate it. I wanted to ask about the $250 million item for the Treasury Board Secretariat for pay list reacquirements that seem to have a lot to do with accumulated severance pay benefits. I was doing a telephone town hall on Tuesday night with my riding, and there was a woman that called in who is near the end of her career with the civil service, and so a bunch of her colleagues and friends are as well. And she was saying that there's been a lot of challenges with receiving their appropriate severance pay when they do leave the civil service. She attributed that to problems with Phoenix. So I'm wondering, I guess, first of all, is part of the problem that the government has not yet come to Parliament for the proper authorities in order to be able to dispense these severance monies? Or if it really is a problem with Phoenix or some combination thereof, are we confident that this money that's going to be approved in Sub C is going to get dispersed to the people that it ought to in a timely way?
Okay, thank you for the question. The $250 million that's in Sub C is specifically to deal with the last remaining agreement from that 2 rounds ago now of negotiations. There's one specific group in the Canada Revenue Agency. To my understanding, they've already paid out at least that $250 million, and the item in Sub C is to reimburse them for what they've already paid to their employees. CRA, to my understanding, is not a pay center or Phoenix department. I can't speak to the
So
specifics.
this is CRA specific.
This is CRA.
It's not
This is
across
CRA
government.
specific money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Coming back to the question around the SISIP, excuse me, that Mr. McCauley was asking about. I just wondered, it talks about halting charges. So I recognize that there may not be enough in the account now. Does that mean we're paying penalties now? And is that a feature of the contract then? And how are those penalties assessed, and how long have we been paying those penalties?
So, thanks for the question. I don't have a lot of details, but I can give you a one-year example. So in the contract, there are conditions whereby if that 40% of, 40% of the premiums that are paid, so Manulife has to keep those on hand to ensure it's financially sustainable. If they fall below that amount, Manulife uses its own money. So they give us a capital charge, they call it a C charge, and they charge us interest. So I have collected for you that we paid interest of $616.9 thousand in 2016, and as the longer that goes on, the more interest we pay. So
Penalty that's assessed,
That's
more
right.
like a loan, it's not.
it's like a loan, right?
per
It's
claim.
to pay them for
Okay.
any of their capital costs that they use because they're using their own money.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep, I hear you. Thank you very much. I guess my last question for you has to do with the money for paying public sector unions dues that they haven't received. I'm just wondering about the mechanics of that. But I guess normally that would be money that's employee money, which is why it wasn't initially budgeted. And so this is extra money. Do we know when to expect that this issue will be resolved? And if so, is this expenditure going to be worked into next year's budget? If we
Mr. Blakey, you
anticipate
better
that
cut your question short. A quick answer.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. The way the process works is that when employees are paid, a portion of their pay is directed to union dues, and because of challenges with the Phoenix system, we have not been depositing all of the union dues owed the unions. And so in this estimates, in the supplementary estimate C, there is an item for for PSPC. It's a non-budgetary vote because they will be advancing money to the union to make good on our obligation. It's a $14 million appropriation, and then when challenges with the Phoenix systems are resolved, that will be paid back to us.
Thank you. Madame Mendez for 7 minutes.
Wasn't it Mr. Cal? Okay, sorry. Thank you for being here and for trying to make light of some quite extensive details on sub-Cs. I was curious, in the stabilization of Government of Canada's pay system, okay, the budget of the budget is $172.5 million. We're talking about Phoenix, I imagine, and what would this imply? Is this just the hiring of more pay experts and advisors? What would that mean? Please, thank you.
Thank you, Madame Mendez. So the item that you're referring to is presented as a horizontal item in these supplementary estimates, funding for the stabilization of the Government of Canada's pay system. And this comprises funding to 2 departments. So to Public Works and Government Services Canada, it's $166.1 million. And this is essentially threefold. It is money to add capacity, so they are hiring additional compensation advisors to address the backlog. There are system fixes, so they're going into the software of Phoenix and making changes to that system so that it functions properly. And then changes to the underlying HR to pay process. So looking at all of our rules, the classification system, the way in which we reimburse people for overtime and acting assignments and promotions, et cetera. So all of that is being looked at to make sure that it is streamlined and efficient to support the system.
That go with the IT part of it?
IT systems are intended to automate your underlying processes, and what we found through the Phoenix system is that there were certain challenges to our underlying HR processes, and so we're looking at those business processes and making the changes that are necessary and essential so that the system can
But
function properly.
these processes then were not found to be lacking with the old pay system? Or
I
dealt with manually? Or?
yeah.
For example, some of the processes that have been in place like literally for decades, right? So one of the things that we found, for example, is that there are some relatively simple pay transactions that have to be approved and reapproved, say 3 or 4 times before it actually enters the pay record, as opposed to what we should have done in updating the IT system was to update the business processes as well, so that they would be more efficient. And I think that's what we're trying to do now, is we're trying to address both things at the same time, while trying to also address the backlog.
The second element of this horizontal item is funding to the Treasury Board Secretariat, and that's $6.3 million. And again, this is multidimensional. There is to support this business process review, we've stood up a new HR management transformation sector, so working with PSPC and with departments, the chiefs of HR and all the departments, to understand the current processes and what can be streamlined. And we also have established a claims office so that those employees that have been negatively affected by Phoenix and are incurring accounting fees for accounting services or interest on credit cards, they can be reimbursed for those charges.
Would that also include the excess taxes that they're paying on their income because of badly calculated T4s at the end of last year, or?
So no, we wouldn't. CRA is looking at processes and to ensure that if an employee has been overpaid and then they're overpaying their taxes, what is their process to get reimbursed for that? So the claims office wouldn't deal with that. But if the employee has to go out and hire, an accounting firm or an H&R Block or somebody to resubmit their taxes and with updated T4 slips, we would certainly pay for that because that shouldn't have happened.
Okay, thank you. Now, in the international assistance priorities, I'd like to understand why we're adding, well, I think we're adding this $202.5 million to what was voted in the budget, 17-18.
Just to be sure I understand the question, you're talking about funding for foreign affairs?
International assistance priorities. That's what I have here. 202.5 million.
Right. And so this is a top-up to the existing budget at the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development. And the funding is being transferred from the international assistance envelope. So within the framework, there are monies identified for international priorities, and specifically...
Does this include the Rohingya top-off for donations that was announced by the government at the end of 2017?
I don't know about that specific initiative, but I can tell you that that this money of $202.5 million is intended for multilateral programming that is aimed at disaster assistance, humanitarian relief, and grants to multilateral institutions. So I believe in terms of that humanitarian relief, this might in fact be part of that, but I would have to confirm that.
Because then you have the other item that says help developing countries to address the impact of climate change. I know it's different. It's very specific to climate change. Would this be going also to global affairs, or is this something that you would?
It's also thank you. It's also an item for foreign affairs, and we're talking about $169.7 million. This program is set up with the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank, and it's there's two streams to this. There's the Canadian Climate Change Program, which has a global reach, and so through the IFC, Canadian money is being pooled with funding from other donors and is available to support climate change programs around the world. And then there is a second stream, which is the Inter-American Development Bank Canadian Climate Fund, and that is focused on the Americas.
Thank you. We'll now go to the 5-minute round, starting with Mr. Macaulay.
Thanks. I just have some quick questions. Under the TBS, the $6.3 million for Phoenix, is any of that money being used for outside consultants?
So the quick answer is yes, but I'll kind of tell you how. So 4.9 million of that 6.3 that we're focused on is basically to look at, as Brian talked about, we're taking our HR systems and how they feed pay.
Yeah, the outside consultants, who is it?
Well, depending on what it is, we have several initiatives underway, and so there's lots of professional services plus other companies. I'd have to get back to you.
Perfect, yeah, if you don't mind.
There's quite a few actually working with us
Perfect.
right now.
Great, and I've heard stories that the government's going out to a very large RFP for an outside consultant for assisting with Phoenix. I've heard stories of it's about a 3 to 6 month RFP period. I'm wondering if you can tell us about that.
So I'm sorry, I can't actually. We have posted the request for service, but we haven't yet signed a contract.
Okay, have you posted publicly?
Well, we've asked for
Is the
bids.
RFP public?
Yes, we've
What's
put it out.
what's the scope of the RFP?
It's looking for.
And what's the value as well, please?
We were looking for consultants who actually have a very good understanding of PeopleSoft, the PeopleSoft system. That's our HR system that feeds
So it's all.
pay.
So this is all about PeopleSoft.
That's right.
Okay. There's money for, as there always is, for advertising. In this committee, we actually put forward a report suggesting the government should move the advertising away from Facebook and more to traditional Canadian companies, local newspapers, et cetera. Have you received any direction from the government that this money should be pushed toward that, or is this money going right into U.S. digital media for the advertising? Do you know?
So this specific request in Supplementary Estimate C, Mr. Macaulay, is for Public Works and Government Services, and it is digital advertising to support moving Canadians to direct deposit. In terms of broader direction on the government, on the advertising policy, I'm not part of those.
See anything yet? There's 5.9. I'm sorry, I'm getting away from Treasury Board. There's 5.9 million for fighter jets. Can you tell us exactly what that is for? We're obviously not. We haven't even really launched anything yet. What is that money for specifically?
It's two streams. Approximately 4.1 million of that amount is for the interim replacement. We've struck an agreement with the Government of Australia to purchase F-18s and parts, and so we're ramping up for that.
So what's that 4.9? Because we're seeing that's 2020 for it's another 2 years before the first 40-year-old jet shows up. So what's that 4 million for?
I'd have to get
Do you mind?
more
And what's the
details.
other 2 million of it?
The other is setting up the project office for the design and development of the replacement fighter program.
Okay. Great. And just very quickly, there's money for West Memorial Building, 1.5 million for rehab. That's Public Works again. What is that for?
This is preparing West Block for, it will become the site for the Supreme Court. There is going to be a major renovation of the Supreme Court building commencing next year, and so we're just finishing up swing space, we call it, to move the Supreme Court into that space.
Wonderful. The one last minute. There's the PBO. There's money. We know, the PBO is transitioning obviously from its reporting to the library to a new role. There's $690,000. How much of that is actually going to extra resources for the PBO, which are greatly needed, and how much is transitional costs? Like, Is this actual new resources for them, or is this going to be used up in paperwork as they move over to
Right.
Office for the Parliament?
Mr. McCauley, those requirements are presented and approved by the Board of Internal Economy, so Treasury Board has no line of
So you
sight.
don't-
What I can tell you is that as part of the new legislation and creating an independent PDO, they are adding capacity. There's going to be increased staffing, and I understand that part of that is for those.
So part of it will be for new resources?
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. We go to Monsieur Drouin. 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for our witnesses for being here. Just want to question a little bit. I think, Madame Lafontaine, you had answered some questions regarding the Service Income Security Insurance plan. So we're seeing, and you said this was to replenish the reserve funds of $622.9 million. So are we expected to, and you said you've worked with actuaries, so next year, are we going to expect to see the same kind of amount, or we're going to sort of adjust for next year?
I guess it depends on the number of medically released. So we have made an assumption here. So the previous assumptions were based on 1,600 new medically released CAF members a year. We've upped that now in these new estimates to 2,500. So based on our experience last year and the year before, we expect that to be sort of the going forward amounts, and then we expect it to decline again, but we'll be updating as things change. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. So jump from 1,622 to up to 2,500. That's a significant increase in one year.
It was happening. That's why we got into deficit. It happened over a 3-year period. So Manulife continued to pay out the claims, and so we've got ourselves into deficit. We're paying charges, so now we're bringing ourselves back up to financial sustainability.
Okay, great. First off, Brian, I want to congratulate you guys on the new website for InfoBase. I think it's a tool. It's a good starting point. Maybe slight improvements could be made, and I'm sure I know my Prime Minister always likes to say better is always possible. But one of the issues that I've noticed, and I'm wondering how Treasury Board is working with other departments to ensure that the data and the plans of departments are actually reported. And I'll give you one simple example, and it has to do with CRA and the block calls and what the Auditor General has reported on. Of course, they decide to block calls in order to meet their objectives, and most Canadians would say that's disingenuous with the way we should be reporting, and it's not being honest on the way we should be reporting to meet service standards. And I'm wondering if Treasury Board is working with departments to ensure that this does not happen again, but and it will also have an impact on the Department of Plans and the results that come out of this. And I'm just wondering if Treasury Board is actually working on that with departments to ensure that this does not happen again.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. So 2 parts. First of all, on InfoBase, I appreciate the recognition that it is improving, and I agree. Better is always possible. In my world, we'll get InfoBase to the point where I don't have to come here anymore.
We're good.
Everything that you want to know is going to be on InfoBase.
Yeah.
In terms of the issue of departmental reporting, and it builds on Mr. McCauley's question, we've worked very hard over the last year. There's a new policy from TB on results, and so departments have come forward with new ideas about how they present their business, what their core responsibilities are, and we challenge them on that. And then once we agree on what your core responsibilities are, departments are to articulate what they're trying to achieve, what's the result target, and we challenge them on that. And then what are the indicators you're going to use to measure progress against that target. And so that has been a discussion between ministers, and there's an agreement between ministers that this is who we are, what we're trying to achieve, how we're going to report. Once we have that frame in place, then we provide the guidance in terms of how to develop a report, how to fill out the tables. In terms of the editorial control, it is, at the end of the day, it is a report that is owned by ministers. They sign off on it. We do have a role in looking and challenging, as do 2 other important observers. There are departmental audit committees that are, these are external third-party committees that provide guidance and in some cases direction to departments, and the Auditor General, as you mentioned. And so when we bring those three together, I think we have the makings of the governance to ensure that reports are credible and accurately reflect what departments are trying to achieve and what they have achieved.
And I'm,
When-
oh, wow, 5 minutes.
Mr. Kelly, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Regarding access to information and changes that have been made to the access to information law, there's additional funding. Do you know how many individuals that how many new employees that will translate to? Is there anything you can say about the efficacy of access to information under the new law and with the new funding? Because the delays on ATIPs remain, and the backlog is still, I think, what most Canadians would find unacceptable.
I'm sorry, I didn't note down the number of new staff that we'll be hiring at TBS to do this, but I just want to precision what exactly this money is for. So you know our proposed new legislation is, I think, currently in the Senate. So this funding is to support those proactive publication mechanisms that are being proposed in that new legislation. So, for example, when we prepare like briefing binders like this for our minister to come to committee, these would be proactively disclosed regularly. So this money is for the future when the new Access to Information Act is in place, and it's focused on the current departments and agencies that are involved in access, and it also adds Crown Corporation's Prime Minister's office and the Minister's offices.
For several years, we've seen additional money having to go in to try to address the backlog, and yet the backlog remains. Is there any?
And I think that's probably happening at the departmental level, depending on the backlogs experienced by each department. So hopefully when we get into the position where we are proactively disclosing things, departments can organize themselves not to wait for a request, but to put it out there so Canadians can go and help themselves.
There's additional funding for operational pressures related to the Government of Canada's pay system for the CRA. So this is for the CRA to deal with all of the anticipated additional assessments and reassessments and appeals, or all of the problems that are expected to be generated from the general fiasco that is Phoenix. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's been an increase, for instance, in volumes to the call centers on tax issues for employees affected by Phoenix, and so this provides additional resources for CRA both to address call centers and some of the processing and audit work related to this.
The Auditor General in his report on Phoenix had commented on just the general lack of preparedness, and that there's the resources that have been contributed to dealing with this problem have not been adequate thus far. Is there any? Do we think this is going to do it, or are we going to be here next year with longer backlogs and more addressing an ever compounding problem, or is this? Does this reflect, we think, the true need for additional resources?
Right. Well, thank you. This addresses the needs identified to respond to the problem for this year. There is a multi-year plan in place now to resolve Phoenix, and the requirements for future years to support that plan will be presented in the main estimates or supplementary estimates next year for those future requirements.
Now, the 40,000 odd employees at CRA themselves are not part of the Phoenix pay system. Is that correct? Did I get that correct from Santiago?
They're not served by the pay center directly. No.
Right.
Well, and
Have their own pay advisor.
The size of that department is surprising.
Yeah,
That's fine if I'm out.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Peterson, for 5 minutes, and that's the last round.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again for being here today. And I know that there's a lot of things being balanced right now. You're shifting from the old system vis-a-vis timing into the new system, so we got sort of two streams happening at once. But it's good to see that the legacy system is sort of being maintained while we're implementing the new system to make sure that there's no gaps in service, and I think that's to be commended, but I know it gives you a little bit of extra work to do, so appreciate you being in here. I only have 5 minutes, but I have a number of questions. There's more to the new system, I think, than just the alignment. Of course, it's also the transparency component, I'll call it, and a lot of that has to do with the reporting and information. And really, to get the full picture, someone would have to drill down at the numbers. The departmental plans are really just a segue into those numbers. And I want to talk about the info base and how does that allow the public to look at sort of these expenditures in the same, if they're so inclined to have access to the same numbers that we are here as the committee?
Well, thank you, Mr. Peterson. In fact, InfoBase presents information not only about what you see here in this document, but also allows stakeholders to drill down and get a great deal more information, including FTEs or employees working on specific programs, where those employees are located, the NCR versus the regions. We have demographic data about those employees, so you can see an age band and distribution. Most recently, to Mr. Drouin's point about always striving to do better, there's been incremental adjustments to InfoBase, and in November this past year, when the departmental results reports were tabled that support the final accounting of actual expenditures in the public accounts, we added to InfoBase for the first time results information that shows departmental progress against their commitments. And these are both quantitative, we achieved a 95% response rate, or they're, qualitative, depending on what the target had been. And so I thank you for your interest. The President is very keen on popularizing InfoBase, making sure that it's out there. And as I say, we actually aspire to the point where it is so comprehensive that it makes my appearance here redundant. We did present this to a Senate committee last year, and we would be we'd be happy to come back and provide a demonstration of that tool if the committee was interested.
Well, as for one member, I'd be interested in that, but I'll defer to the will of the committee on that, of course. But I appreciate the insight. I have a specific question, and I don't want to dwell on the benefits, of Canadian Armed Forces benefits, but just with this increase in claims, do you foresee an increase in premiums?
Oh, yes. Yes. So.
And who pays the premiums now? The employer, I take it.
It's I would say on average there's various categories, but on average the employer pays about 95%, and the CAF members pays about 5%.
Right. So with the increased claims, we're either going to have to fund the reserve or pay for more premiums either way.
Yeah, I think we'll be back at this table next in the main estimates or at a following subs once we get an estimate of what the new premiums should be to make sure it maintains its stability.
Thank you for that. And I just had one sort of a more specific question, and it had to do with the write-off of unrecoverable Canada student loans at $203.5 million. I have a question on that. Is when we say write-off, does that are we first of all selling our debt to any third parties to collect it at this point?
So thank you, Mr. Peterson. In fact, the Canada Student Loans Program supports 500,000 students receive benefits, and it costs about $2.8 billion annually. The total outstanding loan portfolio as of March 31st, 2016 was $18 billion, and the average loan at graduation was just over $12,000. The way the loan repayment works, this government introduced changes in budget 2016 so that if you're earning less than, I think it's $25,000, we don't try to recover loans until you're earning a working wage. And then there's debt repayment schedules that are negotiated. If someone falls into default, there is a process with the Canada Revenue Agency where over a 6-year period we try to recover that debt. And only after 6 years, if we've been unsuccessful in recovering the debt, do we write it off. Now, that's not the same as debt forgiveness. We're not forgiving the debt. We're simply removing it from our books, and this is in keeping with accounting standards and agreement with the Auditor General, where we want to project our real liabilities and the real likelihood of recovering costs.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of the first round. I thank the witnesses, and I think there are a couple of questions that have been posed and that you will be sending the information back to them. So we will suspend it for a minute. Be back ASAP because the minister is here, and I'm sure everybody wants to ask him questions. Committee members, if you want to spend time with the minister, you better sit down. Yes. Okay, fine, not a problem. So, continuing on with our study of the supplementary estimates C and interim estimates, we have our second panel with the Honorable Minister Scott Bryson, President of the Treasury Board, and Madame Barty Glochu. You told me am I there? Am I there?
Very good.
Yeah, good. And Madame Renée Lafontaine and Brian Pagan. So welcome, Minister. I believe you have some opening remarks, which you will keep short, I hope. Okay, don't, we have time constraint.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, I don't know how to take that.
Take it as a friendly.
As you're aware, I'm very, as committee
Kelly.
members are aware, I'm very sensitive. So
You shouldn't be.
I will heed that. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and I've said this before, but I think it bears repeating. I have a lot of respect for the work that committees do, and having been a member of Parliament for almost 21 years, I've spent most of my time in opposition, in fact, and I enjoyed and valued my work on committees, and I understand full well the importance of the work of committees. I'm delighted to be here with Brian Pagan and Renee LaFontaine and Yaprak Baltajulu, the Secretary of the Treasury Board. If I may indulge for a moment, this will be Yaprak's last appearance before a parliamentary committee, I believe. Yaprak is sadly, for me and for Canadians, is retiring after 30 years of public service, having served a lot of governments. But her story, as somebody who came here at the age of 22 from Turkey, who was educated here, raised children here, and chose to serve the Canada that she loves and make an immense difference in the lives of Canadians over that period of time. She's been an exceptional public servant, and I want to thank Yaprak on behalf of all of us for her work. And it's not too late. There we are. I know that our officials have been with you over the last hour discussing the highlights of Sub-C and interim estimates 2018-2019. Madame la Présidente, avec ce budget supplémentaire des
Madam Chair, I want to start by reinforcing that with these supplementary estimates, the government is seeking Parliament's approval for funding to address matters of importance to Canadians. This is why we are seeking, as you heard, $4 billion in additional spending for 48 organizations.
million to support veterans and their families, $434 million in support of Canada's defence policy, $202.5 million towards international assistance, $277.6 million for Canada's military contributions to international missions. We're seeking Parliament's approval to create more opportunities for Indigenous peoples, attract talent to strengthen university research, to build strong Indigenous communities, and to innovate to solve Canada's big challenges. And we're happy to take your questions on both Sub-C and also interim estimates for 2018 and 2019. I would like to discuss our broader agenda briefly, Madam President, to reform the estimates process and to improve its alignment with the budget. Comme Brian l'a mentionné, pour la durée de la présente législation.
As Brian mentioned, for the duration of this Parliament, the main estimates will be tabled as late as April 16th. Due to this timing change, I expect Brian is as excited as I am that this year's main estimates will actually reflect this year's budget.
That we have tabled interim estimates. This is the first time that the government has provided Parliament with a document showing the specific amounts to be proposed in an interim supply bill for each vote of each department with an appropriation. The purpose of the interim estimates and interim supplies to provide the government with sufficient cash and authority to start the fiscal year until we request the full authority through full supply of the main estimates. To better support this purpose, You'll notice an important change in the way that voted authorities are presented in the proposed schedule to the appropriation bill. We now show both an amount of cash that the department requires for the first 3 months of the fiscal year and the total authority, and that is the value of contracts, grants, and contribution agreements, for example, that they can commit against the vote for the year beginning on April 1st. If you followed the progress of the second Budget Implementation Act last fall, you'd recall that we sought an amendment to the Financial Administration Act to enable this change. This simple change to vote wording provides greater clarity for departments which then work and must work within the authorities approved by Parliament. Il s'agit d'un autre exemple de
It's an example of our commitment to improving the clarity and transparency of the estimates and supply process.
improving the clarity and transparency of the estimates and supply process. As important as these interim estimates are, they're really just the teaser for the main event, and that's the next budget and the main estimates. As the Minister of Finance has announced, the next budget will be tabled on February 27th. And by delaying the tabling of the main estimates, we will be able to include new spending measures from the budget in the main estimates, and to get those funds working for Canadians as soon as possible after they're announced in the budget. It really does make the estimates process more meaningful. In the past, we would have the main estimates before the budget, and we would debate the main estimates, and then the budget would come along, rendering much of what we talked about in the main estimates irrelevant. And I value your time as committee members, and I hope that this actually enables you to play an even greater role in terms of not just holding our government to account, but future governments to account. As Brian and Renee explained, we're continuing to work on the other pillars of estimates reform, the option of changing the nature of the vote to reflect the purpose, the why, rather than just the nature, the how of the expenditure. And we're also committed to having the 2018-2019 departmental plans tabled at the same time or very soon after the main estimates. Madam Chair, that concludes my opening remarks, and looking forward to having a discussion. I always enjoy this committee.
Thank you very much, and we'll start with the first round, the 7-minute round. Mr. Peterson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. President, and to the officials for being here. We do appreciate this this component of our committee. It's I think a role that we all take seriously, and I think we can all agree that the new alignment will perhaps allow us to do that, fulfill that function of our committee work a little bit more effectively. I want to talk about the alignment. Of course, is just one feature of the new process, and I wondered if you can elaborate on other steps that are being taken to ensure the process continues to be more transparent, more clear, and aligns up department sort of priorities with the budgetary process. What other steps behind just the alignment are being taken to make this process more open and transparent?
One of the things I'd like to come back to the committee to discuss are the departmental results frameworks, which is a very different reportage of departments to Parliament. Much more results focused than ever before. In the past, reports were focused on outputs. We are trying to focus reporting on outcomes. In the past, reports were focused on processes. We want to actually focus on objectives and what we actually get done on behalf of people. So the indicators you will see in the departmental results framework are, first of all, they actually relate to objectives that we want that we believe Canadians would share and understand. The old reporting was not one that I think was really understandable or pertinent to citizens. So that's something I'd actually like to come back sometime and have a more in-depth discussion and actually go through and compare the old program architecture reports and the new departmental results framework, just so that you can see, and we can do it, in a couple of departments to show the difference. And what it is doing is creating an alignment between the government ministers, but also in the public service, and in terms of a transparent reportage process to citizens that ensure that we're really keeping our eye on the ball in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So I would like to come back actually and spend some more time on that and program-based reportage, the work we're doing with transport as an example of that, which provides a lot more detail than you would have had in the past. I mean, the objective here, I think the changing of the sequencing of the budget and the main estimates is actually an important step forward. It will take time to achieve the full results of that. I mean, you're dealing with the machinery of government in terms of finance, Treasury Board, and departments. It is a significant change. I look at the gold standard in terms of budget estimates process. I really like the Australia model, and where budget and estimates come out basically simultaneously. And I think that from an efficiency perspective and from an accountability perspective, I think it's really good. But we're moving in that direction. I think that's positive.
Thank you. Maybe a little more technical question, but just there's also going to be a change in the accounting methods, and there's still I think some work to do even in the officials' assessment of the the reconciliation tables introduced and the budget and estimates. How far are we along that road, and how big of an undertaking is that really? Is that just a technical accounting change, or is there much work to do?
I did notice when you had a technical question that was really tough. You looked at Brian, not me. But I do believe that the reconciliation tables that we are including now that help align cash and accrual accounting, the estimates and budget accounting, are really important in terms of parliamentarians' ability to understand what we're doing and make it clearer to people such that you can follow the money. Brian?
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Peterson. We've, as mentioned in my previous remarks, we've been working very closely with finance over the last number of years on our shared agenda to make the numbers more understandable. The last 2 years in our supplementary estimates in the spring, we've had that reconciliation table. This year, because we're tabling the main estimates after the budget, we are going to have that reconciliation in the main estimates. And so that's a terrific advancement. We have continued this effort at reconciliation. So in the supplementary estimates C, there's a number of online annexes, and there is an annex there that compares the budget to the estimates and provides that ongoing reconciliation. And it's more than just accounting, as we've explained previously. The budget is comprehensive, and so it reflects all expenses of government, including tax expenditures like the Canada Child Benefit. And so we break out the totality of expenses and then account for that accounting difference, that difference between cash and accrual. And it's actually quite small. It's about $6 billion.
I can assure you, Mr. President, I wasn't implying just the way I was looking that you weren't capable of answering the question. We share an alma mater, so I know you're a well-educated young man. So, and I think I may be
for Dalhousie University.
How's my time, Madam Chair?
One minute.
Okay, I just want to. I know that there's the pilot program with Transport Canada. How's that going? And what lessons have we learned from the pilot?
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. So it's ongoing, and through the first 2 years, no challenges at all with respect to Transport Canada's ability to allocate their grants and contributions to their recipients. As the Minister mentioned, we have a new results policy, and so you will be seeing a new frame for Transport Canada this year, because they are aligning their grants and contributions votes according to the core responsibilities that I spoke of earlier. And as we indicated, we've advanced the idea that we might want to build on this pilot and try this with other departments, but we welcome feedback and direction. Yeah.
Thank you very much. we go now to Mr. Macaulay for 7 minutes.
All right, welcome back, Minister. Yepra, congratulations on your retirement. Thanks for everything you've done. For a country, I know 1 year with the minister is like 7 in the real world, so I'm sure.
Just with me, you're.
Yes, I know, yes. Yes. Minister, I just want to, we spoke to Mr. Pagan earlier about this, and we brought it up just about who's writing the editorial content of both the departmental reports, and I'm glad they're going to be released at the same time of the estimates, but the departmental result reports, but also the estimates. And I read it out to you, some of the comments here. Money for the smooth functioning of courts and promote greater access to justice for all, and Department of Heritage amplify the office of the Governor General and help build a stronger Canada. It seems we're moving away from transparency by writing, it looks like, political content and not, accounting content to be delivered to Canadians. And then getting back to the departmental reports, as mentioned earlier, I'll use public service as an example. In her report, she doesn't mention Phoenix at all, but she goes on about the Canada Post report where part of her achievement is thanking the committee for the work they did. And it seems quite odd that a departmental report put together, meant for transparency where Canadians' money is being spent, is written about such frivolous stuff, but also misses such important stuff as Phoenix. Who is responsible, I guess the ministers, but who's overlooking to make sure that they're delivering on your promise on the pillar, which is, I think, pillar number 3, about, pillar number 4, providing high quality information and performance targets and results in departments?
Well, thank you, Mr. Macaulay. You used a couple specific examples there. One was smooth functioning of the court system and justice for all. Would you imply that those are partisan things? I would think that that is something that all...
I'm not saying they're partisan things, but they don't
no,
provide transparency on where the money is going, and I think you know that, and you're trying to make this a partisan issue and trying to make it appear that we don't agree with justice. I'm just asking who's writing the editorial, and it seems to be politicized by yourself.
Well, what is political about the smooth functioning of the court system?
What I'm asking is,
or
you promised to
all.
provide transparency for the estimates, and that's wonderful. We support that, but the writing does not explain where this money's going to.
Again, not to be a stickler, how is smooth functioning of the court system or justice for all inconsistent with transparency? I think it's a pretty reasonable description of what
where's the 3.5 million of that going then?
Now you got a question. Now you got a question.
What I'm stating is that should be in the line. Provide the more detail of the 3.5 and get away from the fluffy stuff. I'd like to see the transparency, which you've committed to, which is wonderful, and I support you, but we'd like to see in the estimates the commitment followed through on, which is the transparency and the openness. So a parliamentarian or a Canadian can pick up the estimates and say, well, we've got $3 million. Where's that going for Department of Heritage? Oh, it's amplifying an office. We'd like to see the details, and we'd like to see commitment of that money. But let's go to the departmental reports. Who's going to oversee to ensure that the departmental reports are delivered as you're intended in your pillar, which I support your pillar number 3, 100%. It's a great pillar.
That's right.
But how are we going to ensure that that's actually getting done?
Oh, I understand. In terms of the language, you'll see a strong correlation between estimates language and finance, or rather budget language, because you're actually the idea here is that the estimates reflect the programs described broadly in the budget. So you will see a strong correlation in that. In terms of the departmental results framework, each department writes its departmental results framework. There is a process through which deputy ministers and ministers meet with Treasury Board ministers. We have done, and we continue to do that today. And we play a challenge function. I can tell you the language being used is very much. It's the kind of language that makes it very easy to explain what a program seeks to achieve, and the indicators. The indicators are ones that that are measurable and over time longitudinally will show results. But the best thing to do would be to actually, and I would like to come back and actually bring some of those reports and compare them to the previous program architectural.
Perfect. We'll do them with the estimates.
reports.
I want to get back to your comment. Great respect for the work that committees do, and I appreciate the long term you spent in opposition. I want to bring this back to something we've discussed with you previously about the whistleblower report. The report was done by the committee, a unanimous report, support from the NDP and the Liberals and ourselves on it. It required, I think it was 15 legislative changes to protect public servants. And you say you respect the work the committee did, but you basically just binned the report. Now you've said, oh, we're going to consult. What have you done constructively to fulfill the recommendations, the 24 recommendations of the whistleblower
First of all,
report and the very, very needed changes?
First of all, we're working with federal institutions to seek ways to improve the protection of public servants and to ensure that it's absolutely clear our government's position in terms of ensuring that public servants have a safe place.
You get a commitment from your government to bring about some of these recommended changes, these needed changes to protect people.
But beyond that, as I said, I am interested in the committee's report, and we are working. We've been working, as
when
you know.
can we see a commitment, date-wise, from your government when we can see these much-needed recommendations to protect our public servants and others and taxpayers brought into effect?
But there's actually work that is being done on an ongoing basis within our government that reflects.
Would you
that
provide
desire.
a report to the committee of what you've actually done then, since the report's been
Look,
issued?
I would be interested in actually coming back to the committee to discuss that
We
whole
invited you,
area
but your
of
government
public
members
service
voted
disclosure.
down your appearance, if you recall.
I couldn't.
We invited you in a motion, if you recall, your side voted down your
No,
return to discuss that.
At some point, I can come back and discuss those. Again, we have had at Treasury Board a very active agenda.
Mr. Macaulay, your time is up.
as
Yeah.
a government, but I mean, I'm as I
Thank
said
you.
to you, and in fact, in a letter to the committee, I actually commended the committee for its work on it and expressed my interest
Thank you.
in following up
Thank
in
you.
terms of both the direction and the specifics.
Report on Canada Post as well, and we saw, well, that went nowhere. as
Your
well.
time is up. Mr. Blakey,
thank you
7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome, Minister Bryson. It's always great to have an opportunity to delve a little deeper into particular issues with you here at committee. The supplementary estimates, C, were one of likely two last chances for the government to include whatever appropriations might be required to keep the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories employees in the public service pension plan. I noticed that there does not seem to be anything in supplementary estimates C about that. I know you're familiar with the issue because yourself and Minister Carr have been meeting with the unions involved for the workers who are facing essentially being shut out of their pension plan, and the deadline for that is this September, which is why there's so few opportunities for government to appropriate whatever funds might be necessary. When you were last here in November, I had asked for the costing of that. So a decision's going to get made one way or another before September. Either a decision will be made to allow them back into that pension plan, or by default, they'll be pushed out if the government does nothing. Do you have the costing for what the financial impact for government would be to keep those employees in the plan?
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'd like to start, and then I'll call on Yaprak as well on this issue. The Harper government's decision to sell off AECL has had a very significant impact on CNL employees. We understand that. We're doing everything we can to offer pension protection for employees affected by that sell-off. It is not possible for CNL employees to remain in the public service pension plan as they are no longer public servants. But we are currently working to bring in regulations that will protect the employees' pension eligibility, with the goal that those new regulations would be in place prior to September. You cited September as being an important date in terms of
Those
the
regulations.
transfer. So
The effect
the
of the-
regulations. So the regulations
Would they
ensure
allow
that-
them to stay in the plan or not?
Well, it would ensure that the duration of the current and for the duration of the current and future employment with CNL and their age of retirement, it would will be used to determine their eligibility for an unreduced pension under the Public Service Pension Plan for their service to the date of the transfer. And the regulations will help mitigate and adverse effects on pension benefits by allowing also survivor benefits and in situations where these employees marry or enter into common law relationships or have a child while employed by CNL. And again,
But is it the position of the government then that there won't be anything done to have those employees be able to stay in the plan past September?
Well,
What you're
it's a-
talking about is trying to facilitate
to
the
protect-
existing benefits
that-
for up to the cutoff date, but not to continue those
Well,
employees within the pension plan.
the issue we have, Daniels, is that if somebody is no longer a public servant, it is not possible for them to continue to participate.
Awkward employment
that.
situation, isn't it, though? Because, I mean, CNL is not the employer of the employer is a company, if they are the employer, because the employees stay with CNL, regardless of who gets the management contract. So, and I think that's a 5-year management contract. So, so a private contractor comes in to manage the assets of CNL, including the employees. They're not technically the employer, because if the management contract changes, those same employees will stay with CNL. They'll be managed by the new contractor. So are the employees CNL employees? And where exactly does CNL fit if CNL is not the employer? Or are they the employer? And then there's a management contractor. I mean, it seems to me to be a deliberately vague employment scenario, the consequence of which is that while these employees won't be the employees of whoever's managed or hired to manage the assets of CNL, they kind of remain with CNL as if they continue to work for government, just as the assets nominally remain government assets. But the effect is that they're shut out of some of the benefits of working for government. I mean, that seems to me to be a strange strange way to structure the management of those assets. And the only real obvious substantive outcome is that those employees are shut out of the pension plan.
These are good points that can help inform regulations. And as Yaprak and Renee and other public servants are engaged in that, that is something you may want to add something further to.
One of the concerns going forward is that if government doesn't intervene to change the model, one of the ways they could do that would be to try and come to an arrangement where these effectively civil servants, even though not in name, but they continue to remain with an arm's length company that technically owns government assets, although contracts out management of those assets. One way to do that would be to allow them to remain in the plan. This seems to me to be a bad precedent for government workers, where government can set up a shell company, transfer its assets, and the employees in some strangely defined way, and say, you're going to continue to remain the people who maintain these assets and work with these assets. You're going to have a different manager from time to time. And by the way, you can't have your pension anymore. And that seems to me to be a bad model if you're looking at it from the point of view of the people who have maintained these assets for decades.
The genesis of this, of course, was the decision of the previous government to sell the asset. What we have is that people who were public servants and as such participated in the public service pension plan are not, who are not going to be public servants, and that I think is the nub of.
I think the government can make
thank
right
you, Mr.
by
Blakey.
dealing
We're
with public
seeking ways
servants.
through the regulations to help ameliorate some of
Thank you.
those issues. But I appreciate very
Mr.
much
Durant, for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to our witnesses for being here. And I too will get on the train to wish you good luck in your future endeavors and happy retirement, if there is such a thing. Minister Bryson, and I'm looking at Mr. Pagan, but I'm also looking at you. And but one of the questions I didn't get to ask Mr. Pagan previously was about the pilot project at Transport Canada. What is it that our committee could do to improve or to build on the pilot project? Do you foresee any other departments embarking on this purpose vote structure in order for us to adapt? I want to make sure I understand correctly from previous testimonies, or actually I'm quoting, I think, a 2012 report, that would trigger about 593 votes if it was implemented at large. It may have changed now, but I'm just wondering how could we help?
Well, I'd turn this back. Would this be something, would there be consensus among committee members that would you like to see more of that? I mean, has the Transport Canada pilot benefited you as parliamentarians in terms of following the money? And also feedback, for instance, Infobase as an example, is a tool. It'd be great to have feedback. First of all, in terms of the Transport Canada pilot, has it helped you, and would you like to see it expanded? So I would turn that back to you and colleagues here, because if there's a consensus and an interest, that would help inform our thinking on that. Because the objective really is more transparency and more accountability to Parliament and citizens. So, is it useful?
But also we can do Infobase.
Yeah, the Infobase one. We did a demonstration of Infobase to the Senate colleagues, and they found it very valuable. And maybe we should do an Infobase demo here, because it really is a big help.
And do you find that, would you anticipate potential problems with, so it worked with, I'm assuming that obviously Transport Canada has a seamless, there's a seamless transition towards purpose-based funding, vote structure. There was no issues there, so would you anticipate potential problems with other departments or agencies?
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Joanne. In fact, that would be very much the reason why we would propose to approach this as a pilot, to make sure that we had a measured approach in proceeding, and that we could in a very limited way test all of our assumptions and the applications of this. Just to make it very concrete, when we talk about purpose-based votes, just using TBS as an example right now, we've got $919 million in these sub-C that we're requesting. That is spread through existing votes, our operating vote, and some votes that we administer on behalf of the public service as employer. In a pilot of a purpose-based approach, we would take our new results framework, where we have defined roles as the employer, as the expenditure authority, as the regulatory authority, and we would present the same items, but according to those roles. So the purpose or the vote would be according to our core responsibility as employer. And the idea is that, as the President says, it would allow committees and stakeholders to maybe follow the money better in terms of the key responsibilities, the key activities of departments. When we presented the ideas last year, as I think the committee recalls, lots of discussion around timing, and unfortunately we never really got past a decision on timing, and so we would welcome a report or recommendation as to whether this should be pursued, and we do have some ideas about how we could do that, but we did not feel that there was any consensus to expand the pilot at this time.
Well, also, if you think about the purpose-based votes, if the purpose is not clear, then it doesn't really matter how much money you attach to a purpose that is not understandable. So what we put this year a lot of effort behind the departmental results framework. And when Mr. McCauley asked about who is scrutinizing this, we actually spent endless hours trying to make sure that the language is clear. Not only we understood it, we're hoping that parliamentarians will clearly understand it, but more importantly, that Canadians would understand it. it should say what the money spent will do, and it should have measures around that. So if we can get the frameworks right, then it's easier to attach the purpose-based votes. So we're trying to get the purpose right. The votes have to follow the purpose. Does that?
Yeah. The other question I have, is there any thoughts about, and I've looked, I've surfed on the InfoBase website, and I think it's a great tool to, it's a great start. It's a great start, and I know there's always room for improvement. And the issue that that I could see coming up, and maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but on direct program spending, I think Canadians would be interested to know how many funding is dedicated to serving Canadians. So the numbers of, I see that we have access to the numbers even by age of employees working in a department, but on the direct spending, we don't have access to how many Canadians it actually serves. And is that something you guys are working on?
We have one of our mandate commitments is, the service agenda of government is being led by Treasury Board, but one of the big parts of that, you can't talk about government services today without talking about digital services. And right now we're a blockbuster government serving a Netflix citizenry, and we have to up our game in terms of digital services. Canadians wonder why they can't get the same quality of service from their government when they renew a passport that they've come to expect from Amazon when they buy something. And other governments, we set up over the last year the Canadian Digital Services Unit, which is modeled after the U.S. Government Digital Services Unit and the UK Government Digital Services Unit. The U.S. one was set up by President Obama in 2013. And that's because on October 1st, 2013, Obamacare was introduced in the U.S. And on that day, 4.7 million Americans tried to register for health care on healthcare.gov. Only 6 Americans succeeded. It was a big screw up. And sometimes big failures create the environment for new startups, and that's what we're doing in terms
Thank
of
you very much,
startup.
Minister. We now go to our 5-minute round. Mr. McAuliffe, I guess you're sharing your time with Mr.
Yeah, I'll be very, very brief. Minister, thank you for committing to come back for us to discuss whistleblowers. People's lives are still being destroyed. It's still in the news, lives being destroyed by lack of proper whistleblower protection. We have a motion just handily on hand right now that we submitted February 5th, that the committee invite the President of the Treasury Board to provide a briefing on the progress made by the current government in implementing the recommendations made by the committee in its report to Parliament on strengthening the Public Service Disclosure Act and to better protect whistleblowers who speak out against wrongdoing in their departments, and that the meeting be held no later than March 29th, 2018. Now, this is the same motion that we brought in about 2 months ago that the government side voted down to prevent Mr. Bryson from attending. So I'd like to put through this motion now and have a recorded vote on it. We can move back to the estimates.
Sure.
Seeing as the ministers kindly agreed to come back.
Yes, Mr. Drouin.
I'm just going to say March 29th, there's 2 weeks that we're not here, so can you be flexible on that date?
It's up to the minister if he can commit, put through, suggest an alternative, and let's move on and get the minister to commit and come back.
Let's keep the dates flexible.
Of April?
It's been a while since I have done my scheduling. And every time I insert myself in my scheduling, things get screwed up.
How about by summer?
So that would be great. Thank you.
Agreeable? Fair? Okay.
The summer break?
Do you want a recorded vote, or can
Yes,
I
please.
do a, recorded vote? All those in favor? Sorry, yes. Oh, sorry, yes, you're absolutely right.
I don't think we need a vote. I think everyone's in agreement.
So,
By June 15th. I think is the last sitting date.
So I'll read the motion as amended, that the committee invite the President of the Treasury Board to provide a briefing on the progress made by the current government in implementing recommendations made by the committee in its report to Parliament on strengthening the Public Service Disclosure Protection Act to better protect whistleblowers who speak out against wrongdoing in their departments, and that the meeting be held no later than June 14th, 2018. All those in favor of the revised motion, please. Now you want to do, okay, thank
Turn it
you.
over to Mr. Deltel.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deltel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Messieurs, Mesdames, merci bien de m'accueillir à votre comité.
Thank you for having me on your committee. And Minister, it's always nice to see you. I'd like to congratulate and thank Ms. Baltachoglu. I'm sure people sometimes get it wrong with your name. I know that my family name confuses people as well. So anyway, thank you very much, Ms. Baltachoglu, for having served our country so well.
First of all, Minister, congratulations for your French, and I will never say that enough, that I appreciate the fact that you hard work on your improving your French.
J'apprécie beaucoup votre patience avec mon français aussi.
Patience.
I greatly appreciate your patience with my French.
Minister, talk about another example to have a better transparency in this government, because we all remember that one of the first piece of legislation that this government tabled was the Bill C4, who killed some transparency tool for workers. So this is why we are very concerned, but we will see what the government had to table, and we'll be very careful on that. Maintenant, Madame la Présidente, bien heureux d'avoir le président.
And now I'm very happy that the president of the Treasury Board is here for such a direct exchange. And in our opinion, the president of the Treasury Board is the ultimate protector of Canadian taxpayers' money. So we're talking about $330 billion, which need to be examined very closely. And it's up to the president of the Treasury Board to decide whether each and every dollar is being spent in an intelligent manner.
To agree with spending $8.2 million for hockey ring in front of Parliament. Was it a wise public money spending, yes or no?
Tout d'abord, j'aimerais commencer avec votre commentaire.
First of all, I'd like to start with what you said about C4, because we inherited a difficult situation with the negotiations with the public service. We inherited it from the former government. We're working very hard to recreate a culture of respect towards the public service and towards unions. We negotiated in good faith. We negotiated the collective agreements in good faith, and they now represent more than 90% of public servants. So I think that that's very important. It's something that's very important to recognize, the importance of the public service and their unions. We have a great relationship with them now.
On the investment made as part of Canada 150 by my colleague, the Minister of Heritage, Melanie Joly, the Canada 150 rank again, that is something that is contributing very significantly to the Winterlude festivities here in Ottawa, the 40th anniversary of Winterlude until the end of February, in fact. There's been more than 120,000 Canadians, visitors who've had the opportunity to skate on it. It is, there's ringette and there's sledge hockey. And in fact, all Canadians can come to the National Capital Region. They can reserve their tickets to take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime activity. And I'd urge, this is, we're celebrating a big deal. Canada 150 is something truly special. And it's not like some fake lake that you're not going to actually get to do anything with. This is actually something that you can participate in, get good physical activity.
Thank you, Minister.
And enjoy one of Canada's great recreational activities.
Minister, thank you. We go now to Mr. Sims for 5 minutes.
Mr. Sims for 5 minutes? No, you don't want?
Mendez.
Questions of the minister.
I thought you wanted.
You want to share?
Okay, we'll share. Thank you so much, Mr. President of the Treasury Board and your officials. That was quite a funny little end to the Canada 150 festivities. I won't go there. I will go back to Phoenix because it's something that, as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, has been occupying us a great deal, and preoccupying us, not just occupying us, preoccupying us a great deal. Going forward, and I know that this item called stabilization of the Government of Canada's pay system is, a chunk on the estimates C. I know that one of the big items will be hiring or completing the hiring of new pay experts that you would need to get this done properly. There will be some IT expenses too. But how do we expect to get this resolved in the reasonable amount of time that our public service should expect it to be resolved? And by that I mean less than a year, that we don't drag this out for 5, 6, 7 years like Australia had to do in one much smaller instance. So I'll just like to ask you, do you think this amount would be sufficient to try to address this issue within that limited scope of time?
Thank you very much. It's, Alexandra, the IBM Phoenix pay system issue is one of the toughest ones, and I've served in cabinets of 2 governments. This is one of the toughest public, it's not just public policy, it is the execution issue that I have dealt with. And you mentioned the need to hire pay experts. Part of the challenge is that 700 pay advisors were let go prior to the system actually being operable, the new system implemented. And one of the keys in this that you learn in terms of future is you don't gut the legacy system before the new system is operating. And in fact, some of the people we are hiring are actually, we're trying to bring back some of those people because they have invaluable experience and understanding of the pay system in a department by department basis. We have been working closely with the union leaders. In fact, we had a discussion with them again yesterday. And one of the recommendations they've made, with which we agree, is we need to put more people back in the departments. And so we are working to that end. We are also, there's and Yaprak can speak to some of where we are investing, but we're investing $142 million to recruit and hire, train people across government. Beyond that, it's important to remember that the IBM Phoenix pay system was conceived about a decade ago. The technology available then and the IT methodologies practiced then are very different than those that exist today. And while we work very hard to stabilize the existing system with departments across government, working with PSPC and OGGO at Treasury Board, we also believe that looking at new approaches and taking a look at if this were a greenfield project today, if we were looking at this situation as it is today, unimpeded by the blinders that often occur in government around the tyranny of sunk costs that keep you trying to make what you've spent money on work. If we were to look at this with fresh eyes, with a fresh team of people using modern digital protocols and technology, that you may find that there's a new way that can actually address this issue faster. And so you need to take a look at this from a 2-track approach. Continuing the work we're doing right now to make the existing system, to stabilize the existing system, but also at the same time being open to completely new approaches that reflect modern digital today that weren't even available 10 years ago when this system was conceived.
We'll go to the last 5 minutes, and Mr. Deltel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, well, j'ai beaucoup de respect pour mon ami.
I have
have a lot of respect for my friend and colleague, the Treasury Board President, for his very good skating ability. But we know that there are $8.2 million that were spent on the skating rink in front of the Parliament building. It's unreasonable. It makes no sense. In Quebec City, we have the Quebec Carnival, and if we had spent that much on Bonhomme Carnaval's castle, it just wouldn't have been accepted.
And he can answer clearly. Does it think $8.2 million for hockey rink is wise public money spending? Yes or no?
Mr. Chair, again, as part of Canada 150 celebrations here in our nation's capital, an attraction that has enabled over 120,000 Canadians to skate and to bring their families and the natural beauty of Ottawa winter that we've all come to love and appreciate.
So for you, it's wise. It's good.
It's an investment that actually has attracted over 120,000.
So it's wise. For you, it's wise?
Again, 120,000
Is that good?
visitors. And again, I would...
Yes or no, mister?
Again, Mr. Deltel, this is not some fake lake that costs a lot of money and nobody uses. This is something that actually, as a recreational
Minister, why you can't answer clearly to my question?
That celebrates one of Canada's great pastimes, skating.
What a great idea, and killing by
sledge
stupid spending money. That's the reality, sir. I do respect Canada. I do respect their history. I do respect the capital. I do respect hockey, our national sport. But I will never spend $8.2 million for hockey rink in front of Parliament. You kill a good idea. Don't you believe that?
Look, I believe very strongly that in Canada 150, the investments made, big and small, in communities big and large across Canada, have made a real difference in terms of Canadians celebrating our country.
Wise public money spending?
I think those investments, and there were investments in Quebec City, there were investments in communities in my riding.
In that
those
case,
are big and small
in the hockey ring,
investments
Minister,
across the country, and I think they've made a real difference.
This hockey ring, $8.2 million, real difference, of wise spending money?
I believe very strongly that the 120,000 people who came to Ottawa, who have skated on that ice, who are celebrating Canada's athletic traditions, I think this is actually something in a Canada 150 that reflects a shared value of Canada.
The value of Canadian are not to
spend. And that is the ability to have fun in very cold Ottawa winters.
That's incredible, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. I take it for a yes, but that's not a good signal sent to Canadians. That for the Treasury Board Minister, the one who said yes or no for spending money, saying that $8.2 million for hockey ring is correct in front of Parliament, that's nonsense. But the example is coming from the top, Madam Speaker. When we see a government spending too much money without having any control, with deficit of how much deficit this year? When will you get back to zero deficit? When you spend too much, you have that kind of stupid example, and hockey ring is a stupid spending money. This is where we stand.
But Mr. Deltel, and I have great respect. You're a very effective member of Parliament. You don't put that in your brochure next time.
I will.
But I can tell you. You talk about hockey and you talk about waste of money. The previous government spent about $1 billion on government advertising. Some of that was for 30-second advertisements during the NHL playoffs, 30 seconds that cost $100,000 each. And if you want to talk about spending money, when you spend about $1 billion as a government on quasi-partisan government advertising, our government has actually cut by half government advertising expenses. And when you cut that quantum
what we see in that demonstration, Madam Speaker, is a clear example that unfortunately the minister cannot say clearly that it's absolutely stupid to spend $8.2 million for a hockey ring in front of Parliament. And because of that, this is a great idea. I do support that, but not with that money. Not without so much money. That's crazy.
Your time is up, Mr. Deltel, and I'd like to thank the witnesses. I thank the minister for being here, and thank you all for being here. It's been a lively meeting.
very much.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, and Madam Chair. I want to thank all the members of the committee, and it's just great to be back with you, and I'm looking forward to coming back next time too. I do want to come back, though, however, on the departmental results frameworks, and I also would commend to you a demonstration of the InfoBase system, because we've strengthened it a lot, and I think that it would be good for you as members, but also for staffs, I think, who are probably more familiar in some cases than members on.
And Yaprak, we wish you the best in what you do. And I hope you will keep in touch. Take care.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.